guys, welcome back to Spelling and Word Study. My name is Mrs. Rhoades and I'm here to get you started on Unit 12, AR, ER, and OR endings. Please take a second to gather your materials. You will need your purple book, open to page 77. You will also need some colorful pens, markers, or crayons. Remember, whatever I mark up on my board, you should be marking on your paper. Please save room for a key as well. If it doesn't fit on this page, a separate sheet of paper is fine. If at any point I'm moving too fast, please pause the video and catch up. So, for the last several weeks, we have been learning about derivational suffixes. Those are endings we put onto a word that change its meaning and change its part of speech. So for instance, last week we focused on the suffix meant, and we found out that when you put meant at the end of a word, you can change a verb to a noun. So for instance, manage becomes management, and assess becomes assessment. This week we're going to see what happens when we add the derivational suffixes AR, ER, and OR to a word. But before we do that, let's read our list. Please repeat after me. Calendar, circular, consider, counselor, customer, director, editor, equator, governor, janitor, manager, monitor, narrator, officer, regular, similar, soldier, survivor, vinegar, and visitor. Okay, so hopefully you heard that sound at the end of each word. Notice I already broke the words into syllables, and then I used a green check mark to mark up the stressed syllable. None of these words have the final syllable stressed, and that's why whether it's AR, ER, or OR, they all morph into that sound, okay? If those syllables were stressed, then we might pronounce the OR and the AR a little bit differently, okay? Now, if you want to pause the video to mark up your syllables, go ahead and do that. I find it very helpful when I'm trying to spell these words because I don't worry too much about the stressed syllables, but breaking them up draws my attention to these unstressed syllables and those tricky schwa sounds. Remember, the schwa is that sound in words like counselor and customer. That's the part of the word that you really have to focus your attention on, okay? Although you will see today that finding the verb in most of these words will help you with the spelling as well. Because the first thing I want to talk about is the suffix OR. When you put OR at the end of a word, it can change a verb to a noun. And action becomes a person who. So for instance, a counselor is a person who counsels you. They give you advice. A director is a person who directs you. They tell you what to do in a movie. Stand here, pretend to cry, say this line with a little more emotion. They are directing you. An editor is a person who edits your writing. They go back and give you suggestions. They fix your spelling. They do that sort of thing. A governor is a person who governs a state. they make sure that the rules in that state are being followed. A narrator is a person who narrates a story or narrates a movie. They tell you what's happening. A survivor is a person who survives a life or death situation. And a visitor is a person who visits you. They're a guest. Okay? So in all of these cases, we have an OR suffix meaning a person who. A person who counsels, a person who directs, a person who edits. Okay? Now, don't get tricked. Just because a word ends with OR, it doesn't always mean a person who. So, for instance, a janitor is not a person who janets. A monitor is not a person who monits. An equator, I mean, this is a stretch, but if we think about the equator wrapping around the middle of the earth like a belt, it does break the earth into two equal pieces. So I guess we could say an equator is something that equates or makes equal the top and the bottom of the earth, but that's a little bit of a stretch. Okay? Now, we can also use the ER suffix to do the same thing. So for instance, a manager is a person who manages a company or manages a business. I don't see any other examples here, but you're probably more familiar with this. A teacher is a person who teaches. A baker is a person who bakes. A preacher is a person who preaches. So orange box equals suffix. And on this list, it means a person who. It can also mean a thing that. So a toaster is a thing that toasts. A computer is a thing that computes. A refrigerator, ooh, that would be an OR, is a thing that refrigerates. So for this list, we're focusing on people, but keep in mind these suffixes also work for things as well. Now again, we don't want to be tricked because an officer is not a person who offices, and a customer is not a person who customs. So those don't fit so neatly here. Okay, when you get to page 80, I believe, you're going to have more practice with these two suffixes. In the first chart, you're going to get a bunch of verbs and you're going to turn them into nouns by adding ER or OR. So act will become actor, advise will become advisor, counsel will become counselor. One thing to remember is since all of these suffixes start with a vowel, you're going to have to drop your silent E. So when you change narrate to narrator, get rid of the E. And when you change survive to survivor, drop that E. You didn't have to do that last week with the meant suffix because meant starts with a consonant, okay? Dropping the E is a rule we follow only when we're adding a suffix that starts with a vowel, okay? And then in the second chart here, you're going to be doing the opposite. You're going to be starting with a noun and you're going to change it to a verb by dropping the suffix. So farmer will become farm, liar will become lie, manager will become manage. Okay. What else do I want to talk about here? What I do want to do quickly is I want to go through the list with you, and as we talk about the meanings of these words, I want us to be clear about their part of speech, which words are nouns, verbs, adjectives, or which ones can be used in more than one way. So if we start with calendar, you know what that is, right? It's something you hang on your wall. You've got a page for each month. It helps you figure out what day of the week different dates fall on. It's also a place for you to record your doctor's appointments and your baseball games and that sort of thing. So a calendar is definitely a noun. So let's put an N there, right? It is a thing. Circular means round, right? Like a circular block. So that is a describing word. It describes a circle, right? So we're going to put ADJ there to remind ourselves that circular means round. To consider something means to think about it, right? Like maybe you have cousins who are about to graduate from high school and they're considering different colleges, or they're considering going into the military. They haven't made up their minds yet. They're just thinking about it, thinking about their options. So that's a verb. A counselor, we already talked about that, is a person who counsels you. So that's a noun. A customer is a person that buys stuff. So that's a noun. Director is a person who directs a movie. Notice a noun is a person, place, or thing. So as soon as I say person, you're like, oh, it's a noun. Editor, that's a person. Equator, that's that imaginary line that I talked about. That's a noun. Governor is a person. A janitor, that's somebody who takes care of a building, right? Like a custodian, right? So they might empty the trash, they might change the light bulbs, they might just make sure that the building is safe and clean. So that's a noun. Manager, that's a noun. Monitor, ooh, this has two different meanings. So a monitor can be a person, right? Somebody that keeps watch. So sometimes on school buses, all school buses have a driver, but sometimes they have a bus monitor as well. Someone who sits in the front seat and monitors the kids and just makes sure that they're sitting safely. So a monitor can be a person, but it can also be a verb, right? Because it's the job of the monitor to monitor things. They keep an eye on stuff. Narrator, that's a noun. Officer, like a police officer or an officer of the court, that's a noun. Regular. Regular is not a thing, right? It's a describing word. I'll get my regular order at the coffee shop, meaning I'll get the usual, right? So that is a describing word. Similar is also a describing word. It means almost the same, right? Like this hand and this hand are similar. They look almost exactly the same. Soldier is a person, right, who protects our country. By the way, be careful when you're spelling it, soldier. It almost has a J sound in there, so watch that spelling. Survivor is a person. Vinegar is like a sour liquid that people use for cooking. They make salad dressing by pouring oil and vinegar together, so that's a noun. And then a visitor is a noun. Okay, so over here we have noun, verb, and adjective. N stands for noun. And this week, all of our nouns are concrete nouns, which means they're people, places, and things. Easy to identify, easy to touch, easy to draw. Verb, those are action words, things that we do. The only one we had this week was consider and monitor. And then an adjective is a describing word. And you'll notice, by the way, all of our adjectives this week ended with AR, circular, regular, similar. So that might help you. But then, of course, nothing simple in our language. So calendar and vinegar also ended with AR. And of course, those are not adjectives. So whatever. I think this is all I have for you today. Good luck, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.